Good morning, Key Stage 3 students, and welcome to this very brief assembly on your end of year assessments, which will, we hope, allow you to prepare and make sure that you can do the very best that you possibly can in your assessments coming up this week and after May half term. So I showed you this slide last time that we met in our assemblies, and I think this quotation really sums up everything that we're trying to do over the next few weeks in terms of getting ready for those assessments. Confidence comes from being prepared. We want to make sure that we feel as prepared as we possibly can going into our assessments to make sure that we can show our teachers and our examiners just how well we have learned everything that we were supposed to do this year. So this is all about getting prepared and about building our confidence ahead of assessment. We've also talked a lot about the three-legged stool, the idea that students, parents and school need to work together in order for you to be successful. And again, this is about making sure that you know exactly what's expected of you and what it is that you need to do in order to keep that stool standing up straight. As a school, we've done a lot to help you, to give you resources to prepare you, and now it's time for you to take those resources and do the best that you can with them. As a reminder, your assessments will be in the hall and in classrooms, so we have a combination of the two. It doesn't mean that our assessments in our classrooms are any more important or valuable than the assessments that we do in the hall, but the assessments in the hall do allow you to experience what it's like to take proper formal examinations and help you to get prepared for the feeling of being in the hall and of doing your very best under timed conditions. Your assessments in your classroom will also be done under timed conditions, but it also allows you to have a little bit of extra support from your teachers. They will ensure that you have everything that you need and that you are performing as well as you can be so that you can score as highly in those assessments as possible. Now, what will you be assessed on? Now, we sent home a letter and we gave you guys a copy as well, and the content that you'll be assessed on is listed in your letters. So those of you who've been looking at those will know exactly what is going to come up on those assessments and what we will be marking you on. In the lead up to your assessments, you will have lessons in classrooms which focus on revising for these assessments. And we also want to make you aware that all resources that you need will be posted on Arbor for you, so you know what it is that you're going to be assessed on. The question now is, how do you prepare? How do you prepare for those? Well, assessments essentially serve a purpose in that they tell us what you have learnt this year, and they look at how much progress you have made over time. Now, in your letters, we're telling you what you're going to be assessed on, and these are things that you have already covered in the classroom. So there's nothing new on there. You're not going to be looking at brand new content in these assessments. And we're not expecting you to go home and learn lots of things that you've never been taught in a classroom before. What we will do is set you a series of tasks for homework that link to all the learning that you have done this year. If you complete those assessments and you do the revision that's expected of you, you will be looking over things that you've already learnt. So it's just revisiting old content and making sure that you've secured that it's in your long-term memory and you can bring it up to the fore when it is necessary. Now, revision, or the type of thing that you're going to be doing, it literally means revision, revisiting something or looking at something again that you have already learnt. And what revision does is it combats what we call the forgetting curve. So you have a look at this really nice table on the right hand side of your screen. You will see that time remembered goes along our x-axis and our memory goes along our y-axis. So if you imagine that you're taught something on Monday, you will probably retain about 100% of that on Monday. You've just been taught it, it's in your short-term memory. But as time goes on, that thing that you learnt on Monday, on Tuesday becomes a little bit less clear, on Wednesday becomes a little bit less clear, on Thursday you remember less of it. So as you move over time, you'll see that your memory of particular lessons or concepts or ideas tends to decrease. So what we want to do is revisit those ideas or those concepts. So the blue lines are when we look at something again, it takes a little bit longer for it to be lost or forgotten. If we revisit it a third time, it takes a little bit longer to be forgotten. If we revisit it a fourth time, you'll see that actually the curve is not quite so big. We're remembering lots more of that information. So your homework is really about revisiting, revising things that you've already learned a few times in order to commit them to your long-term memory. But the process of revision is not just looking at notes. It's often reworking, reducing and reforming these notes into accessible aid memoirs. So an aid memoir is a thing which aids your memory. It's something that allows you to recall that information quickly, to bring it back to the front of your mind and use it in a real world example like in an assessment. And the process of revision should be active, purposeful, focused and highly effective. So we shouldn't just be spending time reading our textbooks or reading information on the internet. We need to be doing something or participating with that material in some way. And I'm going to show you a few ways that you might do that on the next slide. So if you take a look on the screen here, you will see a half-term revision plan. So our job is to make sure that you are ready to do your assessments and make sure that you have all the tools that you need to do some revision. And if you have a look here, this is your half term. You have 2 weekends and then you have 5 days in the middle, Monday to Friday. And we have a morning, afternoon and evening revision session. Now some of you have said to me, Miss, I'm much better at revising in the morning, or I'm much better in the evening or afternoon. So there are 3 possible slots that you could use for your revision over May half term. Now the morning sessions, we would say you have an opportunity to revise from 9 till 11. We want to get up a little bit later, perhaps it is the half term after all, and we want to make sure that we've had some rest. But if we wanted to crack on straight away and get our revision done, we could timetable ourselves in for a revision session between 9 AM and 11 AM. Any longer than 2 hours we feel would probably be a little bit too much and our brains start to get a little bit fatigued, so we probably don't want to spend more than 2 hours in a block revising. But that does mean that we have potentially got all of these slots available to put in the revision that we need to do to make sure that we're prepared for those assessments. And that might look a little bit something like this. So you can see here, I have planned in my revision for what the things that I want to complete over the half term. So you can see Saturday morning, 9 AM to 11 AM, I've timetabled myself in to revise English and maths, and I might decide to break that up into 2 hour-long revision sessions, an hour for English and an hour for maths. And that means then that I have the rest of the day and the evening in order to have as much fun as I want to. So if I'm seeing friends or I'm going out with my family, or I'm just staying at home, recuperating, resting, I know that I can get up in the morning and complete that revision and that it's done by 11 AM. And that will give me a really nice sense of relaxation in the afternoon because I know I've done what I need to do for that day. On Sunday I might decide that actually I don't want to start my revision early because I have plans with my friends or plans with family, or I have plans to watch my favourite movie instead of beginning my revision. But what I am going to do is commit to 2 hours of revision in the afternoon between 1 PM and 3 PM. And you can see here that I've timetabled myself in for science and maths, and that might mean that I give myself an hour to revise each of them. And you can see how I've broken this up over the entire half term, and I've even got examples where I'm revisiting revision that I've already done before. So I'm revising English and maths on Saturday morning, and then on Tuesday I'll go back over English again in the morning to make sure that I've really committed that to my long-term memory. And if I have exams or I have subjects which have more than one exam, I might need to factor in a little bit more revision for myself there. And I've also got 2 dedicated Spark sessions on Saturday and Sunday. So my Sparks Reader, which will help you with your English, and my Sparks Maths, which I could put in on Sunday as well. But you can see here that revision over May half term will need to happen. You will have a little bit more information, to process, a little more information to commit to your long-term memory, but as you can see I factored it all in, so I don't need to worry on Saturday morning that I'm not going to complete everything because I've got a plan in place and I know what I'm going to spend my time revising on throughout the rest of the week. Now before we start to actually do our revision, we need to make sure that we've checked our study space. Now very basically our study space should have a desk, a chair, our revision resources, a lamp or a source of light, a clock, some equipment, a computer if that's how you are working at home, and some quiet. Now, the reason for having all these things is that we need to make sure that when we're actually doing our study and our homework, that we are concentrating and that we are focused. So probably the most important thing that you need on this list is quiet. Now, it might be that you have brothers and sisters at home who are very noisy. In this case, we would encourage you to use headphones wherever possible so that you can really get some focus. Perhaps you might like to listen to a revision playlist, or perhaps actually you just prefer quiet, and that will be totally appropriate to wear some headphones, even just to block out the noise. You need to obviously have your revision resources available, so whether that's booklets that have been given to you by science, or whether it's a revision resource that's been given to you by English, and a clock will help you to keep on track. Light is really important, so whether that's coming from a lamp or from natural light, you just need to be able to see clearly what you're doing so you don't strain your eyes. And making sure that you've got your equipment, so multiple pens, multiple black pens, a ruler, a rubber, making sure that you have everything that you need. And if you can't have a desk, or you don't have a desk in your own room, then sitting at the kitchen table or the kitchen counter is also perfectly acceptable. If you are working on a bed because you don't have a desk or a chair, then using a hardback book to just prop yourself up could be really, really useful as well. As long as your study space is comfortable and you can concentrate, that is the main thing. Please also don't forget that we have our hub available to you if you need to over the May half term. The next step to a successful revision session is to remove distractions. Distractions can come in many different forms, but the main distraction that I hear students talking about is their mobile phones. And we're going to ask you to commit to studying by placing your phone in another room, or in a drawer, or away from where it's accessible to you. Having your phone next to you whilst you're revising can be incredibly distracting. Now, research has shown that hearing your phone and its notification causes stress to the brain, and we just don't want any extra stress while we're revising. We want to feel calm and stress-free, and we're going to ask you to commit to some time away from social media whilst you're doing your revision. That will allow you to really focus in on what it is that you need to get done and make sure that you're feeling distraction-free as you're doing some revision. So we advise that you revise in small chunks, so revising for no more than 2 hours at a time. But you can also break this down into smaller sections. Now, there's something called the Pomodoro technique, which essentially says that our brains work well in 25-minute blocks with a 5-minute rest in between. So you could start with revising English, so revising some of your poetry or your non-fiction, and spending 25 minutes completing those tasks that have been set for you on Arbor, and then taking a 5-minute break in between. This allows your brain to have a rest, and you can come back to the next task with a fresh mind. And it's likely to mean that you will actually learn more over time, because 4 25-minute sessions with a 5-minute break in between will actually allow you to work very, very effectively and efficiently over a 2-hour period, instead of trying to struggle with an hour's straight work or an hour's straight revision. Breaking it up into 2 25-minute chunks with a 5-minute break in between can allow you to work smarter rather than harder. It's also important to make sure that you take regular breaks, and there are actually 6 strategies that you can use to help make your breaks even more efficient. It's important to plan your breaks ahead of time, so if you know that you are starting at 9 o'clock with your revision, at 9:25 you know that it's time to have a break. Take breaks at natural stopping points, so think about when you've finished a task. If it means going slightly over and spending 30 minutes on a task to get it complete, then your 5-minute break will be much more valuable to you after that. Think about how you might spend your break. So is it that you want to get a snack, or is it you want to get a drink, or is it that you just like to have a little bit of a walk around your garden or up and down the street to get some fresh air? Maybe you would like to leave yourself a status note. So where is it that I got to in my revision? I got to this question, and when I come back I'm going to move on to the next question. Make sure that you limit your study break time so that it's not spilling out or over a long period of time. It will just make the period of time that you need to revise a lot longer. And make sure that you prepare the break. So prepare for what you're going to do when you get back from your break. So is it that you're going to carry on with this topic, or is it that you're going to swap to a different one and come back and revisit it later? But making sure that you're thinking about your breaks, and that 25 minutes work gives you a 5-minute break, and that perhaps if you work a little bit longer, 45 minutes, you would get a 10-minute break. Just making sure that you've considered them and that you're allowing your brain to have a little bit of rest in between tasks. Remember that your revision is really there to revisit topics that you have already learned, and there are lots of different ways that you can do that. And creating ways to remember information that you've already learned can be a really, really helpful way of making sure that we combat the forgetting curve and that we can revisit information over and over again. So post-its are an amazing way of doing this. They can be places where you draw little diagrams like this one here, labelled, and what's great about them is you can stick them in places that you go all the time so that you can make sure that you remember those key bits of information. Perhaps you could stick it up on the mirror so that when you are brushing your teeth every morning, you can have a little look at your diagram and commit this information to your long-term memory. Using notes pages can be really, really helpful. So here are some examples of some Cornell notes, and that's where we essentially break our notes down into what it is that we're learning, our keywords on the left-hand side, and then the information. And then at the bottom, we write a summary of what it is that we've learned. So that means that when we're looking back through our notes, we don't have to look through all of the information. We can just look at our summaries and revisit that knowledge over and over again. Or perhaps you like to use revision cards, and revision cards can be made from any pieces of paper, or if you can buy special ones too, but they don't have to be that way. You can see a geography example here. A student has put down the most important information about constructive and deconstructive waves, including keywords and a little diagram, and they've obviously been very creative here, but it means that next time that they want to revise that topic, they can look at those images, they can look at the keywords, and they can make sure that they have a really quick way of remembering all of that information that they're committing to their long-term memory. So using techniques like this can really help you to revise, especially in languages when we're trying to learn keywords, in science when we're trying to learn key concepts, and even in English as well when we're trying to think about maybe ideas that we might like to talk about when analysing poems or parts of a novel. It's also important to make sure that we use a variety of resources. So lots and lots of different places that you can go to find information. So for example, we've got Arbor, where your teachers will have posted resources, but we've also got things like Seneca, Sparks Maths, Bedrock Learning, Oak National Academy, and even YouTube can be a really, really useful place for resources when thinking about revising, particularly for things like English, if we're looking at other people's analysis of poems or characters in stories. They can often be really useful places. So if you can use a variety of different resources to help you with your revision and learning that information, that's going to make your revision much more interesting to you, give you a bit of variety and stop you from getting bored or too fatigued when doing the same thing over and over again. It's also important to check your learning. So in your revision timetable, I've asked you to put a couple of different sessions where you go back over things that you've learned before. And that's to make sure that we combat that forgetting curve, that we keep revisiting things, and the more times we revisit things, the more likely they are to go into our long-term memory. But you can check your learning through lots of different ways. You can quiz yourself. So you've got an example from French on the board, some common things that they would need to learn in order to discuss in French, and then quizzing yourself, writing them down, covering up the answers. And you can also do things like copying out your notes from memory. You can complete tasks on Seneca where you didn't get 100% correct and go back over those again and quiz yourself. You know that you got those wrong the first time, so you might want to jot those down and quiz yourself again. You can ask a friend or an adult to quiz you, and you can revisit key knowledge the next day, the next week, just to make sure that it goes into the long-term memory and that you've got a secure grasp of that information if it was something that you needed to know or understand in an examination. And the last thing that we need to do is make sure that we have all of our equipment. So students need to have more than one black pen for their exam. If your one black pen runs out, no matter how trusty, you need to make sure that you have a backup. And it's actually very valuable to have multiple black pens. Green pen can be useful for underlining or picking out information, a pencil if you need to draw any diagrams, a ruler, obviously if we need to measure things or draw shapes to a particular size, a rubber for any mistakes, and a clear pencil case if you have one so that you can take it into the exam. An optional extra is a highlighter. You also need to remember that your drinks bottles need to not have any information on them, and you need to make sure you take off the labels before you go into any exams as well, because those are not permitted in the real GCSE exams and we're preparing for the same thing. Additionally, you need to take off any smartwatches, any watches, put them in your bags, and anything like a Fitbit as well would be something that you would need to remove. You have got access to the time in the hall, it's on the big screen so you know exactly where you are. So to recap, in order to do well at your revision, make sure you check your study space, remove distractions, revise in small chunks, take regular breaks, create ways to remember information, so using revision cards or notes, use a variety of resources, check your learning by coming back to it more than once, so quizzing yourself a few times to make sure you've really learned that information. And a thought I want to leave you with is this, that assessments are an important part of being at school, and they will determine setting and group changes next year. Your results will be reported home to your parents, and the school will use them to determine how much progress you've made. We want to make sure that you understand where it is that you're at and how you can improve, and it's important to take these examinations seriously, to take your assessments seriously, because they do matter, they are important, and they will be useful to you next academic year. And remember, there's still plenty of time. You have May half term to get yourself ready, so if you haven't put in as much effort in your assessments before half term, or seen any reward, or felt as if you've done your very, very best, there is absolutely lots of time left to get this right. And I want to encourage you to use your revision timetables and all the resources that are available online to get yourself ready and make sure that you feel super confident going into those exams. Good luck everybody, and I will see you after May half term.